Have you ever heard the sound of your life collapsing? Not metaphorically, but for real. That sound, the grinding metal, the shattering glass, that was the sound of my past, my present, and everything I believed was my future, shattering into pieces before my eyes. And the worst part wasn't even that. The worst part was the silence that followed. A silence that echoed with a single name. The name of the person I loved most in this world. The name of my son. My name is Alara, and today I will tell you a story not just about betrayal. No, this is a story about how the warmest, brightest feeling, a mother's love, can be forged into a knife's blade. It's about how trust can become your greatest vulnerability. And it's about how I, a woman who lost everything, found the strength to rise from the ashes, scorched but unbroken. Make yourself comfortable. Perhaps this story will teach you what life taught me too late. I always believed that family wasn't just about blood. It's a choice of the soul. When my Leo, the man who was my world, my rock, and my best friend, suddenly left us, his heart simply stopped one sunny morning. My own life froze. The world dimmed, colors faded, sounds became muffled, as if coming from under a thick layer of water. I was an empty shell, a walking wound. But in that moment, in the very heart of that unbearable grief, a pair of eyes was watching me. Leo's eyes. His son, Daniel. His mother, a woman like a blizzard who had swept through Leo's life and vanished as suddenly as she appeared, had left him with us. And in that moment, in the grief that brought us closer than any words ever could, he wasn't just a stepson. He was the last living piece of my beloved husband. He was my son. I took him into my heart and into my home without a single shadow of a doubt, without a hint of hesitation. I swore to myself that he would never feel like a stranger, lonely, or unwanted. And I kept my vow. I fed him. I didn't just cook meals. I learned his tastes. He adored my spaghetti carbonara with that same crispy bacon and creamy sauce his father loved. I remember him, already a grown young man, devouring 2 full plates and then looking at me with such a grateful, such a childlike look. I healed him. I didn't just take him to doctors. I sat by his bed when he had the flu at 17, changing cold compresses, reading to him until he fell asleep. His hot forehead, his ragged breathing, these were the signs of his life that I guarded like a treasure. I taught him algebra. Oh, God, how we struggled over those equations. Me, an accountant with 30 years of experience, and him, a teenager who hated numbers. We would sit at the kitchen table until late at night, and sometimes tears, my tears for Leo, his tears of frustration, would drip onto the textbooks, smudging the ink. I would stroke his back and say, "It's okay, son, we'll manage." We always managed together. And we did. I was at every one of his football games. My voice grew hoarse from screaming, "Daniel, go." I shushed the overly loud fans of the opposing team. I scolded him when he came home after midnight for the first time, smelling of cigarette smoke, and tried to look stern until he hugged me and mumbled, "Sorry, Mom." And then came his graduation. He stood there so handsome, so grown up in his suit, and as I straightened his tie, I saw in his eyes not that withdrawn boy, but a confident young man. And he leaned down and kissed my cheek. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, "for everything." In that moment, I knew I had earned that title. Mom. It was my greatest reward. Our home, that old, slightly worn-out house with the garden Leo and I had planted with our own hands, was our ark. In every crack in the ceiling, in every creaky floorboard, was my and Leo's story. And later, mine and Daniel's. It was our place of strength, our shared altar of memory. He grew up, moved to the city, found a job. But every Sunday, without fail, his car would stop by our fence. And the house would fill with life, laughter, and the smell of Sunday roast again. And then trouble came. Quiet, sneaking. First, the letters in my favorite book began to blur. Then I couldn't read a recipe I knew by heart. The doctor gave the diagnosis, macular degeneration. Age-related degeneration of the macula. My eyes, my window to the world, were slowly closing. The world narrowed to blurry outlines and vague shadows. Reading, knitting, looking at photographs, all of it was gone. But the worst was yet to come. The time came to sort out the house papers, some complicated tax deductions I'd never thought about. The documents were filled with tiny, unreadable print. And I, of course, called him. My son, my eyes, my hands. Daniel's son, I said, I have these papers. My eyes are no good. Will you help your old mom? His voice on the phone was so warm, so calm. Of course, Mom. I'm your son. I'll always help. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything. He came the next day, brought a whole folder with him, sat with me in the kitchen, right where we used to solve algebra problems. Right here, Mom, you need a sign. And here too. It's just formalities to make everything legal. He placed the pen in my fingers and pointed to where I should sign. I trusted him. I trusted him with my whole being. I was signing my life away without even knowing it. I was signing the death warrant for my home, my safety, my past. I thought I was strengthening the walls of my ark, but in reality, I was setting it on fire with my own hands. A month passed, maybe two. Time, for me, deprived of my usual landmarks, flowed differently. One day, something heavy fell into my mailbox. I fished out a thick envelope by touch. With great difficulty, using a magnifying glass, I made out the text. Eviction notice. I didn't believe it. It was some kind of mistake. A cruel joke. I called Daniel. The subscriber is temporarily unavailable. That was the first spark of panic in my chest. I asked my neighbor to drive me to his apartment. We arrived at the building where he rented. I knocked. A stranger opened the door. Daniel? He moved out. A month ago. Said he'd received a big inheritance and was leaving. My legs gave way. The neighbor caught me. Inheritance? What inheritance? We went to the real estate agency mentioned in the notice. A young girl behind the desk, looking at me with pity, showed me the documents. A contract of sale. Signed by me. By him. My house had been sold. Quickly, cheaply, almost for a song. All the money went to Daniel's account. And a week later, that account was emptied, and he himself had vanished. He didn't just steal my money. He stole the very air I breathed. He stole the ground from under my feet. He sold every laugh that had echoed within those walls. Every tear. Every good morning and good night. He sold the memory of his own father. He sold me. What does a person feel when their world collapses? First, shock. Icy, paralyzing. Then, disbelief. This can't be happening. It's a dream. A mistake. Then comes the pain. Physical, tearing you apart from the inside. And then emptiness. Complete, absolute, all-consuming emptiness. I was evicted. At 68 years old, with a single suitcase holding the wreckage of my life, I found myself on the doorstep of a hostel for the low income. One room with greasy wallpaper, a spring bed, and a smell of despair that had seeped into the very walls. At night, I lay awake and listened to a child crying behind the wall and a drunken couple arguing upstairs. And I thought, Leo, forgive me. I didn't keep our home safe. I didn't keep our son safe. The days blurred into one gray spot. I became a ghost. I was afraid to go outside. Afraid of the light. Afraid of people. I was sure everyone was looking at me and whispering, there she is, the fool who was cleaned out by her own son. But one day, rummaging through my suitcase, I found an old photograph. Me and Leo at our wedding. We were so young, so happy. We were looking at each other with such boundless faith in the future. And I suddenly thought, what would Leo have done? He wouldn't have given up. He would have fought. He would have found the strength to get up. And I realized I had to fight. Not for the house. Not for the money. For myself. For the woman I once was. For the memory of a love that was real. I went to a legal aid clinic. I got lucky. My case was taken by a young but incredibly stubborn and principled lawyer, Svetlana. I told her everything. About my eyes. About the trust. About the signatures I placed without seeing the text. She listened to me without interrupting, and then her eyes lit up with a cold fire. Ilara Viktorovna, she said, this isn't just a civil case. This is a crime. Fraud committed by exploiting trust and your helplessness. We will fight. and we will win. The war began. A war with a ghost because Daniel had disappeared. But Svetlana was a bloodhound. She found the notary who had certified the fatal documents. It turned out Daniel had brought him to the house, rushed him, said I wasn't feeling well and we needed to be quick. She found psychiatrists and ophthalmologists who testified that at the time of signing, I, although visually impaired, was of sound mind and clear memory, and therefore could not have voluntarily made such a decision. She pulled all the bank statements that showed the rapid withdrawal of cash and its transfer to an unknown destination. We filed a lawsuit to have the transaction declared void. The trial was the most terrifying day of my life, more terrifying than the day of the eviction. I sat in the hall and felt my hands trembling, and then I saw him. He walked in. My boy, my son. He was wearing an expensive suit I could never have afforded. He looked well-fed, content, alien. He didn't look at me, not once. His lawyer built his defense on the idea that I was an old, sick, insane woman who didn't understand what she was signing and then changed her mind. He claimed Daniel had been caring for me and had just arranged everything for the best. But when Svetlana got her turn, the picture began to change. She, cold and precise as a scalpel, presented the court with evidence, one piece after another. The notary's testimony, the doctor's reports, the bank operations. She built such an irrefutable chain of facts that the judge was left with no doubt. When the judge read the decision, I held my breath. The claims are to be satisfied. The sale and purchase agreement is declared null and void. The property title is to be restored to the plaintiff, Alara Viktorovna. I didn't hear anything after that. Svetlana ran over to me, hugged me, and I just sobbed, burying my face in her shoulder. I sobbed with relief, with pain, with loss. I had won. I had gotten my house back. But when I looked up to see Daniel, he was already leaving. He was walking towards the exit without looking back. And in his back, in his retreating figure, I saw the final and irrevocable end. The end of our story. The end of my motherhood. I returned to my home. It was empty. It smelled of foreign perfumes. There were boxes lying on the floor. But it was mine. I opened a window, and the wind rushed in, sweeping away the foreign smell. I sat down on the floor in the living room, on the very spot where Leo's armchair used to be, and placed my palm on the cool parquet. And I felt not pain, but a strange, bitter calm. Yes, I had lost a son, but I had found myself. That same Alara who did not break. That same Alara whom Leo had loved. Several years have passed. The house has come alive again. I learned to live with my blindness. I found new joys, audiobooks, tactile knitting, walks with my guide dog. Sometimes women from a support group for others like me, betrayed by relatives, come to visit. We drink tea and talk. We talk about life, about pain, about how to learn to trust again. I haven't become callous. I've just become wiser. I understood one simple and terrible truth. Love is not a contract. It's a gift. And this gift should be given only to those who are capable of appreciating it, not to those who see it as a weakness to be exploited. Family can become strangers, and strangers can become closer than family. I lost a son, but I gained a daughter in Svetlana, who still calls me every week. I lost my certainty, but I found strength. And now, sitting on my porch in the evening, listening to the wind playing in the leaves of our old maple tree, I know I am home. Not because I have walls and a roof, but because I have finally found a home within myself. And that is something no one can ever take away from you.